She called the cops while I was slicing brisket 10 minutes before the Veterans Flag Ceremony at our lakeside BBQ. Names: Neldon Whitlow, retired systems analyst, property deed nailed over my porch since 2015. Didn't say much when they grabbed her clipboard. Just tapped the corner where her fake seal was already smudging. Ever seen justice show up before dessert was served? The smell of smoked hickory still lingered in the warm air curling through the pine trees that framed my lakeside cabin like old friends keeping watch. I'd just basted the brisket for its final hour when I saw her walking down my gravel driveway with the air of someone who had already won. Clipboard tucked tight under one arm, sunglasses far too large for her narrow face, and a smile that wasn't so much friendly as it was victorious. She didn't say hello. Instead, her eyes darted to the wooden sign nailed above my porch, Whitlow BBQ, Esteen to 2015. She scoffed, like it was a joke, like the years I'd spent building this place, this smoker, this porch, this piece of quiet I called my own meant nothing, just something she could walk over on her way to some petty victory. I wiped my hands on the towel at my hip. The brisket smoked steady behind me. The air was thick with meat pepper and pride. My neighbors were already gathering folding chairs angled toward the lake, plastic plates and hand stories beginning to bloom like lazy butterflies in the heat. Then she spoke. "This property is no longer under individual claim," she said, flipping through her clipboard as if that were supposed to mean anything to me. "As of this morning, the HOA has voted unanimously to integrate Parcel B into the Elmbridge Commons Initiative." I blinked. Parcel? What? Behind her, a woman in heels, far too thin for gravel terrain, approached, heels stabbing into the loose stones with every confident step. Her red blazer flashed bright against the green pines. Bastina Rel Goff, HOA President. Or, as I called her in my head, the mayor of make-believe. "We delivered notice last Tuesday," she said, voice smooth like pamphlet copy. "It's all here." She held out a paper-clipped stack of documents, the first page titled in bold, Transfer of Ownership. Community Redevelopment Plan. It had my name on it, my actual legal name. But the signature wasn't mine, not even close. I chuckled, not out of humor, but confusion. "You serious? I don't joke with obstructionists," Bastina said, and she pulled out her phone. "Sheriff's Department is already en route." The laughter died in my throat. 2 officers arrived 15 minutes later, the kind that didn't blink when called to HOA disputes. Deputy Landon, tall and tired-looking, and Officer Marie, younger eyes scanning everything like she was still new enough to care. I greeted them with a nod, still wearing my apron tongs in hand. "Morning, deputies. Brisket's about 2 hours out, but I can fix y'all a plate after. We got a call," Landon said, glancing toward Bastina, "about unauthorized occupation of HOA property." "Funny," I replied, reaching into the old lockbox on my porch. "Because this deed says otherwise." I handed him the folder, original purchase documents, title deed, last year's tax receipt, and a county map that showed the edge of my land going 30 feet past where Bastina now stood. He studied the documents in silence. Marie stood beside him, arms crossed. Frida, the clipboard-swinging sister, tried to fill the air. "You'll see, officer, that community consensus grants the HOA jurisdiction in special cases of," Ma'am Landon said without looking up. "I need you to step aside." There was a pause. Not the dramatic kind, but the slow-dawning realization kind. Bastina's face twitched just a flicker at the corner of her mouth, and she lowered her phone. "We can discuss this at the next board meeting," she said flatly. "You made it a law enforcement issue," Landon said finally, folding the deed back up, "so we're treating it like one." Marie stepped toward Bastina. "Ma'am, please return to your vehicle. We'll need a few words with you there." It wasn't an arrest. But it also wasn't what they expected. Frida's hand wavered on the clipboard like it had suddenly grown heavier. I just came to deliver the notice," she muttered. The folding chairs behind me creaked as some of my neighbors shifted forward, watching from the shadows of paper plates and sunglasses. No one said a word. I nodded at Landon. "Appreciate y'all coming out. Coffee's fresh if you change your minds." He half smiled. "Rain check." As the patrol car backed slowly down the gravel, I turned to the makeshift table where Frida had left the clipboard. It was still there, tilted slightly, its metal clip bent. I picked it up, turned the pages. Everything looked official until you looked closer. The header font didn't match any HOA letterhead I'd ever seen. The alignment was off. There were typos in the margins: Elmbridge instead of Elmbridge, a legal disclaimer that trailed off mid-sentence. Like someone had copied a template, pasted it sloppily, and hoped no one would care enough to notice. I stared at it for a long moment. My beer had gone warm. Behind me, the brisket hissed gently, a thread of hickory smoke curling into the air like punctuation. The signature looked like mine. It had the familiar slant, the loop on the W that I'd picked up from an old drafting teacher back in high school. Even the flick at the tail of the N mirrored the way my hand naturally curled when I was tired, but I never signed it. I never transferred my land. And no one in their right mind gives away lakefront Texas soil over burgers and foldable chairs. Sunday afternoon settled over Hesper Bend like a wet blanket. The air was still warm from the barbecue, but quieter now. My cabin creaked the way old places do when they've been disturbed. I didn't bother changing out of yesterday's jeans, the ones still smelling faintly of mesquite smoke, and drove to the county records building. The archive wing sat in the rear past the tax office and a display case filled with faded portraits of past county clerks. The air smelled like lemon disinfectant and cardboard. One fluorescent bulb near the ceiling flickered, struggling against its own expiration. Mildred Rake, who normally processed marriage licenses and small claims disputes, met me at the side door. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she had a soft spot for veterans' widowers and apparently brisket. "I'll pretend I didn't see anything," she muttered, unlocking the back hall. "You've got 1 hour. Leave it like you found it." "I always do," I replied, stepping into the hush of the stacks. I didn't need noise, not today. What I needed was a paper trail. The microfilm reader groaned to life like some museum relic humming against the silence. I threaded the reel and pulled up the HOA bylaws archive. Section 3.7 Community Asset Reallocation flashed across the screen in grainy black and white. It sounded authoritative. It sounded like something Bestina would recite over tea and grievance cookies. But tucked beneath the clause in faded typewritten ink was a note in parentheses, repealed by vote. August 2009, following misuse in Evergreen case. Someone had tried this stunt before. I flipped backward, found the meeting minutes from that repeal. Sure enough, unanimous decision. No asterisks, no caveats. The clause had no legal standing. And yet, there it was stamped faintly on the transfer document Frida handed me yesterday. Community Asset Reallocation. HOA, Securton 3.7. Like a ghost clause dragged back from the grave. I cross-referenced parcel ownership changes. No record of transfer for my address. Not a whisper of movement on the title since I paid off the mortgage in 2017. Then I pulled up my notarized documents, mortgage closure title declaration, even the permit for my septic tank install. I laid them beside the scanned copy of the donation form they tried to hand me. The signature was close, but not quite. The slant was mine, yes, but the pressure was off. I press heavier on my downstrokes, always have. This one danced too lightly on the paper. The spacing between my initials was too wide. Someone had studied me, but they hadn't been me. I leaned back in the cracked vinyl chair, the hum of the reader filling the silence. On a hunch, I examined the bottom corner of the form where the filing code was supposed to sit. Instead of the standard PR 2045 or HO 1987 prefixes, I was used to this one read IUCCX94. Mildred had once told me IU stood for internal use, not meant for public filings. Bootleg paperwork, glossy surface, rotten core. I scanned it all by law repeal deed chain transfer document and saved it to a pair of encrypted USBs I'd pocketed just in case. Old habit from my auditing days, document everything twice, once for truth, once for insurance. I was about to shut it all down when something caught my eye on a zoning overlay in the annex folder. The map had a thick blue line curling behind the lake lots. A new service road proposed 2024 extension. It cut directly across my property, right through the smoker pit, right through my porch. There was no mention of a community center. That was a curtain. The real plan was concrete asphalt and leverage. This wasn't just a land grab. It was a dressed-up bulldozer, and I was the last tree in its path. I returned the reels, powered down the machine, and walked back out into the dimming afternoon. The sun was brushing low shadows long across the gravel lot. I thanked Mildred with a nod she didn't ask any questions, and headed home. That night, I didn't cook, didn't light the smoker. I opened a beer I didn't finish and spent 3 hours online ordering motion-triggered cameras, a perimeter alert system, and steel casing for my document safe. Nothing flashy, nothing aggressive, just the kind of preparation people laugh at, right up until they wish they'd done the same. I sat on the porch for a while watching the pine trees sway. The Whitlow BBQ sign above me creaked gently in the wind. I wasn't angry yet, that would come later. Right now, I was just awake. No one touched the brisket tray. It sat there in the center of the folding table like a sacrifice nobody wanted to claim. Even Vernette Marple, who once asked for seconds before saying hello, didn't make a move. The smell, smoky rich, still warm, hung in the air like a memory someone was trying to forget. It was 7:03 p.m. midweek, and the HOA Community Center buzzed under flickering fluorescent light. The room had that familiar blend of burnt coffee and dusted-down vinyl chairs. Someone had brought sugar cookies in a plastic tray from the gas station. They looked as dry as the agenda Bastina held in her red-nailed fingers. She stood near the projector with the kind of posture you practice in the mirror. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she said, clicking the remote. The first slide blinked onto the wrinkled pull-down screen. Elmbridge Commons, Vision 2024. Beside her, Frida Jo fidgeted in her chair, hands clenched around a styrofoam cup. She hadn't looked at me once. The room was quieter than usual. No idle chat, no clinking of coffee spoons, just the slow whir of the projector and the dull hum of the old ceiling fan overhead. Bastina clicked again. A new slide, underutilized community parcel, Lakeside South. She clicked again. Whitlow Redevelopment Vision. Again. Projected multi-use greenway trail, access point. The same phrase, underutilized community parcel, showed up 5 times each with a slightly different shade of spin. My cabin, my porch, my smoker, all neatly tucked beneath layers of euphemism and Helvetica font. "I'd like to begin by reminding everyone that Elmbridge Commons is a collective dream," she said, "a vision for inclusion, unity, and sustainability. Our bylaws clearly permit the HOA to repurpose parcels for communal benefit when private use falls out of sync with the long-term plan." I raised my hand. Slowly. No rush. She didn't acknowledge it. So I spoke. Section 3.7 was repealed in 2009. That clause doesn't hold water. Bastina smiled like I was a child asking about taxes. "Sir, please refrain from interrupting." I didn't sit. "You're misrepresenting policy. There's no record of vote, no process, no title change. What you're presenting is fiction." She clicked to the next slide without missing a beat. Behind me, I felt the room twitch, the kind of discomfort that leaks into posture, into sudden coughs and shoe scrapes against linoleum. On the left side of the table, Aldon Misk, a retired dentist with too many opinions and not enough patience, looked at his shoes. Beside him, Ulix Bunn picked imaginary lint off his blazer sleeve. They didn't respond. They didn't have to. "We will now conduct a board vote," Bastina said. "The community has shown overwhelming support for this initiative." Frida's hand hovered unsure. Nora Nepat, who once brought me sweet corn after my wife passed, stared into her lap. When she finally raised her eyes, they didn't meet mine. "A quorum has been reached," Bastina declared. "The measure passes." I didn't say anything. Not then. She turned to the last slide. Notice of non-compliance penalties. In accordance with enforcement procedure, she read non-permitted fire gatherings, including backyard BBQs, will be subject to citation beginning next week. A fine schedule will be distributed shortly. There it was. Not about community, not about trails or greenways, just control. I reached into my canvas satchel and pulled out 3 sealed manila envelopes. Walked forward. No words, just footsteps and breath. I placed one in front of Ulix, one in front of Alden, and the last directly at Bastina's elbow. The soft thunk of each envelope landing echoed in the sterile room. Inside, I said, "You'll find a copy of the original deed, the 2009 repeal of Section 3.7, and zoning overlays that disprove your claim. You've been noticed." She didn't touch it. I turned without another word. The smell of brisket still hung in the air now, somehow sharp like smoke that overstayed its welcome. As I walked toward the door, I heard a chair scrape violently across the floor, then a crash, and the tray. Someone I didn't see who had knocked it clean off the table. The brisket spilled across the tile, dark bark scraping against wax paper juice staining the floor like an open wound. No one cleaned it up. I kept walking. Outside, the night was quiet. Too quiet for a place that had once smelled like hickory and neighborly laughter. I didn't drive straight home. I stopped by the edge of the lake and stared at the shimmer across the water where moonlight broke against the ripples. This wasn't about BBQ anymore. I've seen that look before. Orville said, tapping the porch rail with 2 fingers worn from years of field notes and fencing wire. Same clipboard, same smile, same damn scam. It was late past 9. A thin drizzle misted across the pines and tapped against the tin gutters. The porch light buzzed above us, casting halos in the humidity. The mosquitoes gave us a wide berth, likely because of the slow-burning hickory ash in the smoker beside us. Between us, resting on the cedar table, sat a manila envelope. On its front, in blocky black Sharpie, read, Miller Family, 2002. Neither of us had touched it since he set it down. Orville Kane didn't do dramatics. The man had the kind of stillness that made you think twice before speaking. Former county land investigator, semi-retired. Spent most of his recent years brewing chicory coffee strong enough to resurface asphalt and building birdhouses he never hung. He'd called that afternoon. Said he had a few clippings I might want to see. I hadn't seen him since Edna's funeral 5 years ago. She's not creative, this one, he continued. She just counts on people not digging deeper than their mailbox. I leaned forward slightly, arms resting on my knees. The Millers? Nice couple. Quiet. Their daughter went off to nursing school and the place sat empty a while. Karen saw opportunity. He opened the envelope with slow, deliberate fingers and pulled out a stack of yellowing papers, complaint letters, postmarked and water-stained. One had a red-stamped, unaddressed return. Another was marked Final Notice. HOA said the property was unmaintained. Karen argued it had reverted to communal use. Same clause. Same damn Section 3.7. This was back before it got repealed, mind you. Frida helped draft the reassignment doc. They used a photo of a fallen gutter and some weeds to argue abandonment. Took it in a month. He laid out one photo. It was black and white, grainy. Karen stood in front of a faded blue house pointing at the porch with her clipboard in hand. Her expression was identical to the one she wore at the BBQ smug preordained. This is a pattern, I said. She's a system user, Orville muttered. Doesn't break laws, bends them into pretzels. He held up another page, a zoning file slightly warped from moisture. This one's fresher. Found it stuffed in a side drawer at the township annex. Never filed properly. Know what this is? The paper was hand-labeled Phase B Expansion Access Route. There was a faint pencil line snaking from the county highway winding straight through the bottom edge of Coltrane Reservoir and clipping the southeast corner of my lot. She doesn't want a park, I said. She wants a driveway. Exactly. A side access route for construction and maintenance. The BBQ story, the fire code finds its cover smoke. I stared at the faint line again. It passed exactly where my smoker pit stood. She gets the land, sells access rights to the contractors, takes a payout, and pretends it's all part of some Greenway dream, Orville said. That's the racket. He leaned back, adjusting his cracked glasses. One lens had a scratch right across the middle, but he never seemed to notice. Rain tapped against the porch steps in uneven rhythms. And Frida, I asked. She was younger then, still learning the ropes, but she signed off back in '02. Had a different last name then, but I remember the handwriting. It's her. We sat quiet a while. My fingers drummed on the armrest. Somewhere in the trees a cicada stuttered awake, late to the season. Orville nodded toward the smoker. Still got that BBQ sign up. I followed his gaze. There it was, mounted above the porch post wood, darkened by sun and time, but still legible. Whitlow, BBQ, ST2 2015. He scratched his chin. You know what they used against the Millers, a broken nameplate. Said it invalidated any personal claim to the home. You keep that sign clean, legal, visible. It matters more than you think. I thought it was just sentimental, I said. Now it's testimony. He stood with a quiet grunt, collecting the papers back into the envelope. You're not the first, he said, but you might be the last. People are paying more attention now. As he reached the screen door, I stopped him. Why now? Why me? He gave a half smile, weary and warm. Because this time someone's watching. When he left, the drizzle had thinned. I sat for a while longer, listening to the low drone of tree frogs and distant tires on wet gravel. Then I stood, walked to the sign, and carefully unbolted it from its perch. I didn't stash it, didn't hide it. I carried it inside and placed it gently in the hallway closet right on top of the fireproof safe. Some things you protect not because they're fragile, but because they've been targeted. While Frida fumbled with the HDMI cable, I laid 3 printed exhibits across the committee table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The largest HOA meeting in Hesper Bend history had drawn close to 20 neighbors, which around here was damn near a full house. The rented high school auditorium still had graduation banners hanging on the far wall. Folding chairs lined up in crooked rows. A tired coffee urn hissed in the back next to an untouched tray of melon slices sweating in their plastic wrap. Bestina wore navy slacks and a gold silk blouse. Her hair was tightly pinned lipstick, unforgiving. She stood beside a pop-up screen that read, Elm Bridge Commons, Community Tomorrow Today. Her laser pointer clicked impatiently as Frida crouched grunting at the tangle of cables behind the projector stand. The screen flickered. The HOA seal in the corner looked odd, not quite right, blurry, like it had been screenshotted and stretched. The eagle's talons smudged the lettering misaligned. I waited, calm. She cleared her throat as the first slide snapped into focus, an architectural rendering of terraced walking trails, fire pits, and an open-air gazebo labeled Reflection Plaza. Gasps of admiration scattered through the room. We envisioned this as a hub for wellness connection and— "Excuse me," I spoke without standing. Several heads turned. Noran Pat looked at me with her brows drawn, not hostile, not warm, just unsure. I walked to the front, pulling from my folder 3 laminated pages. Zoning Overlay Repeal Certification of HOA Bylaw Section 3.7 and a timeline composite with embedded QR code linking to the footage. I placed them flat on the table. "These are public records," I said, "available at the county annex. They show 1. This project violates zoning designations filed in 2018. 2. Section 3.7 was repealed in 2009, nullifying the HOA's authority to seize private property without due process. And 3. I clicked the remote in my hand. A new image replaced her slideshow timestamped footage from my cabin's motion-triggered camera system. 11:46 p.m., 3 nights ago. Bestina paced behind my porch, talking into her phone, gesturing toward my back fence. Then Frida appeared, holding what looked like a tape measurer. She ran it along the deck line, jotting something into a spiral notebook. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Bestina moved fast. "That footage is illegal? That's private surveillance?" "It's on my property," I said calmly. "You hacked our communications?" "No, I backed up my own." She turned to the board. "This is harassment." I folded my arms. "You called the sheriff on me. You served false documents. You doctored a vote. And now you're standing here passing off digital mock-ups as legitimate blueprints." That's when I raised my voice. "Once. Those aren't blueprints," I said louder, clearer. "They're evidence." The room went still. The projector popped a high-pitched crack and the screen flickered to black. Frida jumped, knocking over her water bottle. It rolled slow and loud across the tile. Bestina stepped back, fists clenched at her sides. "You will be fined," she hissed. $500 per day for hostile non-compliance. Several heads turned toward her. One man, Harold from 3 houses down, narrowed his eyes, hostile to what he asked. Bestina didn't answer. I gathered my documents, slid them into my folder, and turned. On my way out, I passed the fruit tray. Still untouched. The melon slices were starting to curl. That night, I sat by my smoker fire low, stars high, the scent of charred oak in the breeze. The next morning, an envelope lay tucked into my screen door. No return address. The paper was thick, formal. Inside, a notice for a formal county hearing scheduled 2 weeks out. Property title, dispute review, citizen petition B74. At the bottom, faint but real, was the seal of the county clerk. And something else. The faint smell of citrus cologne clung to the envelope's edge. They placed her beloved clipboard on the county clerk's table like it was a loaded weapon, which in a way it was. I hadn't seen her without it before. It was as much a part of Bestina Rel Goff as her cherry lipstick, or the steel blue pumps that clicked across every meeting floor like they had a vendetta against concrete. But here, under the stale fluorescence of Precinct 7's administrative hearing room, it sat alone, stripped of its implied authority, its charm worn down to bare clip and scuffed plastic. She sat, rigid hands folded too precisely in her lap. Her voice, when she gave her opening remarks, carried that over-rehearsed lilt, the kind you get when you recite something in front of a mirror until the meaning drains out. Frida Jo Goff, 2 rows behind, clutched a manila envelope like it was a life vest. Her eyes stared past the back of Bastina's head. Not a flicker of recognition. Her knuckles were white. The county clerk, a broad-shouldered woman in a gray pantsuit, adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "This hearing is to determine the validity of Claim B74 regarding attempted reallocation of private property under HOA Section 3.7, repealed 2009. Mr. Whitlow, you may proceed." I stood, adjusted my jacket. My heartbeat was steady, not calm, but practiced. Like walking across a beam you've memorized step for step. I handed over 4 items. 1. My original deed notarized in 2015. 2. My quarterly utility bills from 2017 to present addressed to Neldon Whitlow, 117 Shoreline Loop. 3. Tax roll printouts, each with certified payment stamps. 4. A thumb drive containing both camera footage and zoning overlays organized by date. The clerk examined the stack methodically. Then she turned to Bastina, and this she said, gesturing toward the clipboard, is your submission. Yes, Bastina replied. It contains the community vote donation confirmation and reassignment documents, all legally binding. The clerk opened the first page. She paused. This document has no county filing code. It was submitted through internal HOA channels, Bastina replied too quickly. That's not a legal pathway for property transfer. Bastina stiffened. It reflects the will of the residents. The clerk raised a brow, then flipped through the packet. None of these pages are notarized. These are drafts, unsigned, unfiled, and unverified. This header, she held up a page with faded text, matches no official form recognized by this office or by county housing boards. The room shifted. One of the court reporters typed faster. The clerk placed the clipboard aside and looked to Frida. Ms. Goff, you're listed here as a witness and secondary signer. Do you confirm the validity of these documents? Frida blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I thought. The envelope slipped from her lap to the floor. I didn't know we'd go this far, she whispered. She said it was just to hold it, until the bids cleared for the access route. Ms. Goff, the clerk said, voice firmer now, did you knowingly participate in the creation of documents intended to misrepresent ownership of Parcel 117 Shoreline Loop? Frida's head dropped. Yes. The room went still. Even the bailiff, stone-faced all morning, leaned slightly forward. The clerk nodded slowly, then turned back to Bastina. Ma'am, based on sworn testimony, physical evidence, and code review, this office determines that your documents constitute a fraudulent claim of property transfer under Statute 14.203 of County Code. Effective immediately, all claims on said parcel by the HOA are nullified. Bastina stood so quickly her chair skidded backward. This is a miscarriage, a community initiative misunderstood by selfish men. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. She tried to steady herself but faltered. Her face flushed not red with shame but purple with fury. The clerk didn't flinch. Your further actions will be reviewed by the district office, she said plainly. Bastina turned on her heel and walked out. The hallway door thudded shut behind her like a courtroom gavel. I stood quietly nodding toward the clerk in thanks and gathered my folder. Outside, the air had that false spring clarity sun blazing but cool under shade. Across the lot, Orville leaned against his truck, arms folded. He gave a small nod. As I approached, I saw Frida standing by the bike rack. She didn't look at me. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small flash drive, and extended it between us. You'll want to see the emails, she said. She never deletes anything. Not really. I took it without a word. Her hand lingered a second longer than necessary. There was a faint smudge of red ink on her thumb, smeared and raw. She turned and walked toward the bus stop. I didn't follow. Instead, I turned the drive over in my hand, feeling the ridges. It was warm. Naran showed up with the old BBQ sign under her arm and a six-pack. She didn't say anything, just nodded toward the porch. I was still in my flannel pajama bottoms and hadn't combed my hair. The fog off the lake clung to the trees like cobwebs that morning. Crisp, early October air made everything feel lighter, even the things too heavy to talk about. She handed me the six-pack Lone Star Tall Boys, a little damp from her cooler. I wiped the dust off, she said, nodding at the sign. I took it from her, tracing the faded red letters with my thumb. Whitlow, BBQ, Estinter 2015. Some of the paint had chipped at the corners. The wood was slightly warped from years of heat and wind, but it was whole. I leaned it against the porch rail and gestured toward the wicker chair across from mine. Smoker's cold, I said. She sat anyway. We didn't talk for a long time, not because there wasn't anything to say, but because sometimes silence is what lets the air settle right. When Orville arrived, he didn't knock. Just walked up the gravel drive like he always did and gave a two-finger wave, in his hand a bent screwdriver and a small paper bag with deck screws. Thought we'd get that sign back where it belongs, he said. It took 20 minutes, maybe less. The hinges creaked but held. We scrubbed off the soot marks from where the flames had once licked too high and bolted the sign above the porch column like a badge. When we stepped back, the three of us looked at it without a word. Naran pulled something from her coat pocket. A small card, faded at the edges, her late husband's handwriting still crisp in blue ink. Bert's potato salad, she said. Thought maybe it deserved a spot beside the brisket sometime. I took it with both hands, careful not to smudge it. Thank you, I said. She looked like she might cry, but didn't. That afternoon, the smoker roared to life for the first time in months. I cleaned the firebox, laid fresh oak splits, and let the steel pit hum like it used to. The wood smoke curled into the air in slow spirals, dancing against the gold and rust-red leaves beginning to drift from the oaks above. Around 4, I heard shuffling down by the driveway. 2 teenagers I didn't recognize dropped off a bag of charcoal and waved. Behind them, a man I hadn't spoken to since the first HOA vote. Marvin, I think, lifted a Tupperware of coleslaw in silent offering. They didn't say much. None of them did. But they came. As the bark on the brisket darkened, I sipped a beer and flipped through a few county files Orville had left me. Most of it was procedural, confirming the new leadership guidelines the HOA would need to adopt. Bestina was officially barred from holding any position of influence pending the outcome of a civil fraud case. Frida had resigned from all committees and left town no note, no goodbye. Just gone. A few board positions remained open, but the rest had been filled by neighbors I barely knew. Younger folks, quieter ones. Not power-hungry, just practical. I didn't volunteer, still didn't plan to. I'm not a joiner, never have been, but I did light the pit again the next morning, and the next. That night, long after Noran had gone and Orville had given me a parting slap on the shoulder, I sat on the steps with a paper plate and a thick slice of bark. The flavor hit different. Maybe it was the break. Maybe it was the absence of fear. Maybe it was knowing the damn smoker still worked. A few claps echoed across the lake. I looked up. Someone was standing on the far dock, silhouetted, barely visible in the evening mist. They raised a hand, then disappeared into the cabin. I smiled, shaking my head. Inside the mailbox held a thin white envelope I'd ignored all morning. I peeled it open, grease on my fingers, and unfolded the page. A formal county offer. Compensation for granting utility access through the lower stretch of my property, the portion they'd tried to take without consent. 7 figures. It started with a 2. Her last move wasn't defiance. It was desperation, the kind you see in someone who's cornered by the very walls they built themselves. She filed suit in small claims court citing emotional distress, community slander, and irreparable damage to public trust. I'd read the brief 3 times before laughing out loud in my truck. Still, I showed up trimmed beard-pressed shirt, a file folder thicker than a Baptist hymnal. It was early spring. Gray skies hung low over Hesper Bend, like a soaked quilt, heavy and reluctant. The small claims courtroom tucked between the license bureau and the assessor's office had all the ambiance of a DMV with better lighting. Judge Dobell sat up front, peering over readers deadpan as ever. Bestina arrived late but confident, strutting in a navy pantsuit that shimmered under fluorescence. Her lipstick was a shade too loud for the occasion, and her binder bulged like it was trying to escape her clutch. My lawyer, Miles Dugan, leaned in and whispered, "She's dressed like she's closing a deal on Wall Street. We're not the ones on trial, remember that." Frida wasn't there, but her presence, her absence, hung heavy in the room. 2 days prior, I'd received an encrypted email. The subject line read, "In case she pulls something." Inside was a scanned affidavit, notarized and time-stamped. It was short, just a few lines, but it ended with a sentence that sat in my gut like a cold stone. She told me to forge it. The clerk called us to stand. Bestina spoke first, making her case with the rehearsed tone of someone who believed confidence could outweigh truth. She used words like coercion, narrative hijacking, personal ruin. She dabbed at the corner of her eye with a folded tissue, then reached for her water bottle but forgot to twist the cap first. A splash hit her binder, and the judge raised a brow without saying a word. When it was my turn, I let Miles do most of the talking. I passed him the file folder and leaned back, arms crossed. Inside were payment logs, the HOA abuse ruling zoning maps, property tax history, and last page a color-printed copy of Frida's affidavit. Judge Dobo flipped through the packet slowly, pausing twice. Once at the utility records, once at the zoning overlay marked Phase B Highway Easement. Then he lifted the affidavit and read silently for almost a minute. When he looked up, he didn't speak immediately. Instead, he turned to Bestina. "You're asking this court to believe that your reputation, not Mr. Whitlow's rights, is the victim here?" Bestina nodded, lips pursed. "And yet you were found in violation of Section 14203, made multiple unauthorized claims under HOA letterhead, and—" "Ah, yes, here's your own sister stating under oath that you instructed her to forge documents." She tried to interrupt, but he lifted a finger. "This isn't a miscommunication. This is the consequence of a pattern." And that was that. He ruled in my favor. $15,000 in damages for malicious prosecution. A 2-year restraining order. Her clipboard, submitted as Exhibit 3 earlier in the trial, was sealed into the court record. I watched as the clerk slid it into a manila envelope scribbled across the top, then tucked it away like evidence in a crime drama. Outside, the skies finally gave way to rain. The new BBQ pavilion opened a month later. Easement funds had covered most of its cedar beams, polished concrete slab, a long counter with built-in coolers and electrical outlets. It wasn't fancy, but it stood proud. I had the old Whitlow BBQ, Estenter 2015 sign rehung right above the pit, and just beneath it, mounted to a varnished panel, was Bastina's clipboard. No caption, no plaque, just her clipboard screwed tight with brass bolts tilted slightly as if still mid-gesture. I tightened the last screw with a quiet click. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. Noran. "We made potato salad," she said. "No raisins this time." I smiled and nodded. "Guess we're finally learning." The smoke rolled up and out over Coltrane Reservoir. Across the water, ducks skimmed the surface and the trees bent toward spring like they knew it was safe again. The cedar smelled sharper in spring, maybe because I knew this time it wasn't covering up anything. The old sign held steady above the pit, and beneath it that clipboard hung still no longer a threat, just a memory made honest. Some fights don't need fists. They just need records patience and the kind of silence that lets truth echo louder than a voice. Sometimes when a structure collapses, it's not the end, it's the start of building something worth keeping. Have you ever faced a neighbor or a moment that tested your boundaries and came out stronger for it? Share your story below or stick around. You never know which tale hits home next.